Chaliye. Welcome in our lecture on poverty. We had quite a good bit of discussion in past few days. We had discussed things about uh, the concepts of poverty calculation right from pre-independence. We went to the ideas given by Dadabhai Naroji. Further, we moved ahead and went to the National Planning Committee. We further went towards the Bombay Plan. There we discussed how our industrialists calculated poverty, defying all expectations that they would largely be focusing on capitalistic ideology and keep the poverty line absurdly low, but they kept it at extremely high levels of 75. Next, we went to post-independence poverty calculation. The poverty calculation first being done by Planning Commission group. Second, it moved towards the Dandekar and Rath Committee of 1971, which gave a uniform poverty line for rural and urban areas. Then we moved towards our classic poverty line calculation being given by Yogendra Kumar Alak Committee. YK Alak Committee calculated poverty primarily based on calories for rural and urban areas having different baskets, though the value was different because inflation was different in rural as well as urban areas. We saw for some bit of time this calculation of poverty continued based on calories, but then the man came, Suresh Tendulkar, in 2005. He changed everything regarding poverty calculation and he included food as well as non-food items. The result was based on 2011 and 12 pricings. The poverty line given by Tendulkar, in spite of having such a wide basket, the poverty calculated by Suresh Tendulkar was 816 rupees per month per capita for rural areas and rupees 1000 per month per capita for urban areas. This was absurdly low, and hence Parliament uproar happened and Rangarajan, the Sankat Mochan of UPA government, was called in, and Rangarajan came up with his own methodology, not very different, not different by few nuts and bolts, but yes, somewhat different from Tendulkar methodology, and he gave his own methodology of poverty calculation. In today's lecture, we would be having a look at Rangarajan method of poverty calculation. Now, what Rangarajan did, listen carefully. First of all, Mr. Rangarajan said that, okay, I will devise a methodology wherein I would change some parameters, I would add some parameters. Regarding calories, Rangarajan said that the calorie requirement as given in 1979 are not valid today. Why these are not valid today? The reason is the calorie requirement when given by Yogendra Kumar Alak in 1979, there was lot of mechanical work involved both in rural as well as urban areas. But now we are living in different times. We are living in so much of automation, so much of machinery, and that machinery is prevalent not only in urban areas, that machinery is also prevalent in rural areas. So why not redefine the minimum calorie requirement for a healthy living? No more it is essential to have 2100 and 2400 calorie requirements. He changed the calorie requirements. For rural areas, he said that calorie requirements of 2155 would be more than enough. While for urban areas, his figure was somewhere around 2090 calories would be enough for living a healthy life in context of increased automation and machinization in our society. This was the first drastic change which Rangarajan had suggested. For your kind information, as you can understand that calories requirement were different for rural as well as urban areas. you can make out that there would have been a different basket for rural area and a completely different basket for urban areas. So Rangarajan just differentiated the baskets of rural and urban areas, which Tendulkar in his recommendations had merged. So a good point worth noting regarding differences between Tendulkar methodology and Rangarajan methodology. Moving ahead, Rangarajan said that I would bifurcate the food items even more minutely. And he didn't himself limit it to just calories. He bifurcated the food items into grains, which would impart calories. He bifurcated into proteins, vitamins, fats, and to your surprise, how much detailed were the recommendation that in case of proteins, he also defined what amount of, in grams, what grams of protein and what grams of fat is essential for a healthy living of rural folks, and what grams of protein and what grams of fat is essential for a healthy living of urban folks. This level of detailing was done by Mr. Rangarajan. Apart from proteins, vitamins, he also added fruits, vegetables, milk, fish, meat, egg, etc. Overall, his basket of food was quite diversified. Third change as compared to Suresh Tendulkar Sahab, the change done by Rangarajan was he changed the reference time period. Again, recalling the concept of reference time period, in case of Yoginder Kumar Alag, we had a uniform reference period of 365 days. While in case of Suresh Tendulkar, a drastic change occurred and we had a reference period of 365 days for non-food items and 30 days for food items. Just to correct, if I misspelled something, I would like to correct if I misspelled, that in case of Yoginder Kumar Alag, the reference period was uniform of 30 days, as all the items were largely food items and it makes logical sense to have a reference period of 30 days. But in case of Tendulkar, the reference period was drastically different. Right from uniform reference period of Yoginder Kumar Alag, Tendulkar jumped into a mixed reference period of 365 days and 30 days. 365 days was the reference period for non-food items like clothing, footwear, education and healthcare, while 30 days was the reference period was for food items like cereals. This was something similar to what Tendulkar said. Then what is the difference? The difference is Rangarajan added one more reference period of 7 days for fresh fruits and vegetables, as their frequency of consumption should be high as compared to other items. That's why he included the reference period of 7 days. This reference period of Yoginder Kumar Alag, uniform, of Tendulkar, mixed reference period, of Rangarajan, modified mixed reference period. So I hope you will remember that this was another important change brought in by C. Rangarajan. Moving ahead, taking into one more change which was effected by Mr. Rangarajan. Mr. Rangarajan said that till now we have been calculating our poverty lines based on individual consumptions. As a society, we do not live individually. This is the characteristic of Indian society, that we do not live individually. We live in families. The matters of families of neighbor often becomes our internal affairs. So that's why Mr. Rangarajan said, not that's why, but in general, we see that India does not lives generally individually, largely it lives in families. So Rangarajan said that our consumption pattern should not be calculated on individual lines. These should be calculated as a whole family, a group of 5 people. On this basis, Rangarajan said and explained very beautifully why he is so recommending that our consumption should be based not on individual consumption but on family consumption. The example he takes is, consider a person living with his family of other 4. So there are 5 people in the family. Everybody uses fan and tube light. So everybody, all 5 of them are consuming basic essential of electricity. But when it comes to paying the bill, the head of the family, maybe the female or the male, the head of the family out of his or her pocket pays the electricity bill. So when the monetary value is considered, that is when the consumption in monetary terms is considered, the 4 people are recorded as not spending anything on electricity, but that one person is recorded as spending 300 rupees on electricity. That one person comes out of poverty in government records, but those 4 persons are not recorded that they are also consuming electricity, though they are not paying for it. Such a methodology is flawed, and a better way of calculating poverty is calculating poverty based on the group, the family, rather than the individual. This was what recommended by Rangarajan, that India lives in families, so we should calculate poverty based on families and not on individual consumption. I hope I have made myself very clear on this, and I hope you are understanding the concept. A big change made by Rangarajan. Another change was Rangarajan introduced one more parameter. The parameter was that if any person is unable to save even after consuming the bare minimum essentials, it may happen that I am able to eat all the fresh fruits, vegetables, milk, rice, chapati, fat, protein. I am able to make way for my consumption, footwear, clothing, education, healthcare, and after all these essential consumption, I am not able to save anything. If this is the situation on ground, then I may be consuming the bare essentials, but I might be suffering from various vulnerabilities. And this was the first step towards moving towards a new dimension of calculating poverty, and Rangarajan said that I would also include a parameter of inability to save as one of the parameter for calculating poverty. And that's why for Rangarajan, apart from having consumed all the essentials, if he finds any family or any person unable to save, he would categorize them or provide them some points of poverty. That's what was the idea of Mr. Rangarajan, that any person unable to save would also be added to the calculation of poverty. Another change with respect to Tendulkar committee methodology, the Rangarajan committee methodology shows, is that Tendulkar committee methodology's poverty line, that is 816 and 1000 rupees, was taken using the data of Government of India's Department of National Sample Survey under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. But in case of Rangarajan, the methodology took the data from a private research institution named Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy. That was a big departure from what used to happen till now. Till now, for the poverty calculation methodologies, the data that was being taken was largely from sample survey and survey done by MOSPI, that is Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and under it, it was National Sample Survey Organization. But Rangarajan departed and he applied the data of CMIE, that is Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy, for calculation of the poverty line. And based on that data, the poverty line was substantially higher when compared to the poverty line given by Tendulkar committee. As per Rangarajan, the poverty line for urban areas using the CMIE data and his own methodology came at 972 rupees per person per capita, means per month. This was an excessively high poverty line compared to 816 of Tendulkar. Of course, this is for rural areas. For urban areas, the poverty line given by Rangarajan was again substantially higher as compared to Tendulkar. Tendulkar committee's poverty line was stuck at 1000 rupees. But in case of Rangarajan, the poverty line was substantially higher at 1407 rupees. That is a good 40% of increment as compared to Tendulkar committee report. So, using the Rangarajan report, government was able to increase the poverty line, and that's why they could have presented a more comfortable figure in parliament that about 29.7% of population of India was suffering from poverty based on Rangarajan methodology. But in case of Tendulkar methodology, the same data came at about 21%. So these were some departures with respect to Tendulkar committee and Rangarajan committee. I hope you are able to understand what all was the universe of poverty calculation with respect to absolute poverty pre-independence as well as post-independence. In post-independence, the drastic changes we observed right from Tendulkar committee. And yes, these were continued by Rangarajan by changing some nuts and bolts without changing the whole machinery, without changing the whole idea of poverty. So this is it about absolute poverty calculations. But then as our civilization progresses, as we evolve as humans, the calculation of poverty also evolves. As we have talked about in previous classes, that there was one point in history of mankind that being alive was considered being not poor. Then we had some progress, and finding a cave to survive became being rich. Then we ahead marched ourselves, and anybody having a settled agriculture land was considered well off. By this methodology, the definition of poverty has been constantly elaborating itself. But as the civilization further went ahead, more broad concepts were brought in by our academicians, by our policy planners, by think tanks, and one of such concept largely applied in the developed world but not so much in the developing countries is the concept of relative poverty. So we are moving towards the next section of discussion on what do we understand by relative poverty. So in this session, just giving you a very brief outline that what exactly I mean by relative poverty. And in next session, we will have a discussion but that would be in next session. In this session, we would have a quite basic introduction to the concept of relative poverty. The concept of relative poverty says that consider there are three people. Consider this person as Mukesh Bhai. This one as Gautam Bhai. And consider this one as Anil Bhai. Each one of them has some net worth. Each one of them say earns something. Anil Bhai earns 3 crore per year, while Gautam Bhai earns 13 crore per year, while Mukesh Bhai earns 130 crore per year. As you can see, all of them, be it Anil, Gautam or Mukesh, all of them are able to get their basic essentials. They are even not suffering from vulnerabilities and deprivations in future, in near future. But if you see these people as a grouping, you will understand that Anil Bhai might always be at the mercy of Gautam and Mukesh Bhai. Why? Because Anil Bhai may not be poor in absolute terms, but Anil Bhai may be poor in relative terms when compared to Gautam and Mukesh. By the same logic, consider me standing here. For sure, Anil Bhai would be relatively more well off than me standing here. So, in terms of relative poverty, Anil Bhai would be relatively well off as compared to me. Now, what is the way of calculation? The idea is, consider each individual's income, rupees 10, rupees 20, rupees 30 and rupees 40. Arrange these income in ascending order. So, 10, 20, 30 and 40. Identify the median value, that is 25, मान लो. So, anybody who earns less than the median value in an economy would be considered as relatively poor. That person would be considered as relatively poor as compared to those who have an income more than the median income in the population. But point to be remembered, those who are relatively poor may not be on absolute terms poor in any manner, because relative poverty is just a comparison. All of these people are well off in society. They have no issues regarding health, education, footwear, clothing, shelter. Only comparison is with respect to another set of population. And that's why relative poverty is always a comparison that is mentioned in its name. That is, it is just a relative comparison. That's what I meant here by relative comparison. Giving you 1 minute, you can have a look at relative poverty. Here, this image which I had inserted, I just want to say that both of them are having enough food. But you can see that both of them are clothed and sheltered. But compared to this person is relatively well off. And this person is relatively poor, though both are able to have their food, clothing and shelter. So just this image, through this image I wanted to convey this message of relative poverty. Have just read it so that we can move ahead. So just a quick recap. I would be just to give you, not recap, just to give you a flavor of what are the next few concepts coming in our upcoming lecture on poverty. We would be discussing about a very important concept which has been asked many times in civils. That is regarding Gini coefficient. That is one of the important measure of income inequality in a country. We would be talking about what does the value of Gini coefficient signify. We'd be talking about what does the value of Lorentz curve signify. Moving ahead, in our next few lectures, we would be talking about what exactly is India's status regarding Gini coefficient values. Our society is moving towards more inequalities, or our society is moving towards lesser inequalities. This we would be discussing, because I would be also discussing some data of monthly household consumption expenditure, which has recently been released, and that has beautifully presented Gini coefficient of rural and urban areas separately. उन पर बात करेंगे. Moving ahead, after we look into Gini coefficient, we will look into the trends. What does Gini equal to 0 and what does it equal to 1 means? Once we are done with this calculation of Gini coefficient, I'd be taking you on a ride towards the understanding of multidimensional poverty, the most modern method of poverty calculation. In multidimensional poverty, you will observe that बहुत हुआ एक डायमेंशन पे पावर्टी कैलकुलेशन का अत्याचार, अब की बार मल्टी डायमेंशनल पावर्टी सरकार. सो वी वुड बी डिस्कसिंग अबाउट what are the various dimensions which government has taken into consideration while calculating multiple dimensional poverty. What exactly is the dimensions which government takes into account while calculating poverty, like standard of living, like education, and like healthcare. We would be further bifurcating these. Like in case of standard of living, what exactly is meant by standard of living? It means having a bank account, having a kacha ghar or a pakka ghar, having some assets like, say, a two-wheeler, motorized vehicles, having a clean cooking fuel. This all we would be discussing in multidimensional poverty report. And it won't be limited to just conceptual framework. We would be taking help of latest Niti Aayog report, because Niti Aayog has presented a wonderful, beautifully drafted report on multidimensional poverty in India, where it has even analyzed each state in few pages. So we would be discussing about that report and the data from that report. Just to give you a brief idea, that in the previous, not the latest multidimensional poverty report, India's multidimensional poverty was somewhere around 20% roundabout. It has drastically reduced to 14%, and it has also bifurcated what are the deprivations. What are the deprivations that a family faces, which is termed as multidimensionally poor, and you would be amazed to know that the single largest deprivation that has been recorded in this report has been the lack of availability of clean cooking fuel. Almost half of the poor are saying that they are not having access to clean cooking fuel. They are still cooking on or through firewood. So some very interesting discussion is coming in upcoming lectures and videos on poverty. So do keep watching. And just before that, I would like you to remind that there is a separate series which I have presented regarding economics explained, where you can find some different current affairs oriented issues like why gold prices are rising, why are foreign investors, institutional investors leaving India, why is China building one belt, one road initiative, and why India has responded in G20 through its India Middle East Economic Corridor. What is middle income trap and what's happening to Pakistan's economy? All this discussion I have presented in my economics explained series. You can look into it in separate video. But Leaving that aside, in next few lectures, we would be continuing with our discussion on poverty. See you in next lecture. Thank you.